Our main topic this week is high leverage practices. For thinkers among us drawn to linear models, our topics tonight are presented on this slide in the order in which each will be addressed. Specially designed instruction, high leverage practices, explicit instruction, and intensive instruction. To accompany each topic is a verb that represents the cognitive objective according to Benjamin Bloom's hierarchical framework. The slide grade shows that we will end class with a charge to reach toward the highest level of creating. For thinkers who also like to see conceptual relationships or the big picture, this slide shows how we will begin broadly and narrow our focus to a specialized subcategory of specially designed instruction. Specially designed instruction, or SDI. Let's begin with a definition. The current reauthorization of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act defines specially designed instruction as adapting as appropriate to the needs of an eligible child under this part, the content, methodology, or delivery of instruction, 1, to address the unique needs of the child that result from the child's disability, and 2, to ensure access of the child to the general curriculum so that the child can meet the educational standards within the jurisdiction of the public agency that apply to all children. We were given the legal definition. The next plan of attack for any stymied speller is to ask, can you use it in a sentence? The concept web here illustrates key ideas from the legal definition of specially designed instruction. SDI is a broad term that specifies the type of instruction students with disabilities should receive. At its core, SDI looks different for different students with different strengths, needs, and abilities. SDI is provided at no cost to the student or students' families. SDI aims to increase access to the general curriculum, and SDI allows students to meet the goals and objectives outlined within an individualized education program. So now that we've examined some key features of specially designed instruction, let's think about it. Imagine that a special education resource teacher states, all of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students in my afternoon reading group have the same fluency goals on their IEPs. So I have been using Fountas and Pinnell's leveled literacy instruction. This seems to be going well. With the limited information we have, what are your initial thoughts? In what ways could this be an example of SDI? What would make it a non-example? Our second topic, nested within the broad category of specially designed instruction, is high leverage practices. Terms like load, effort, and fulcrum might resonate with those among us teaching about simple machines and science. Each of us could probably think of a time when we used a device to increase the amount of force we produced so that we could accomplish a task. There are many devices in your toolkits that act as a lever. Cable cutters, side-cutting pliers, nail clippers, fishing rods, scissors, and bottle openers are just a few examples. Each of the teachers depicted on this slide has several techniques in their teaching toolkits that they use to make an impact on student learning and achievement. Let's push this idea even further. Imagine yourself as a teacher who embodies knowledge and skills that result in specially designed instruction. One characterization of your embodied knowledge would be the use of high leverage practices. The Council for Exceptional Children and the Collaboration for Effective Educator Development, Accountability, and Reform, the CEDAR Center, recently published a collection of high leverage practices that cluster around 4 themes: assessment, instruction, collaboration, and social, emotional, behavioral. CEC and CEDAR generated a set of 22 practices that are considered high leverage for K-12 special education teachers. Under the category of collaboration for K-12 special education teachers, there are 3 high leverage practices. HLP 1, collaborate with professionals to increase student success. HLP 2, organize and facilitate effective meetings with professionals and families. HLP 3, collaborate with families to support student learning and secure needed services. Under the category of assessment, there are 3 high leverage practices. HLP 4, use multiple sources of information to develop a comprehensive understanding of a student's strengths and needs. HLP 5, interpret and communicate assessment information with stakeholders to collaboratively design and implement educational programs. HLP 6, after special education teachers develop instructional goals, they evaluate and make ongoing adjustments to students' instructional programs. Under the category of social, emotional, behavioral, there are 4 high leverage practices. HLP 7, establish a consistent, organized, and respectful learning environment. HLP 8, provide positive and constructive feedback to guide students' learning and behavior. HLP 9, teach social behaviors. HLP 10, conduct a functional behavioral assessment to develop individual student behavior support plans. Under instruction, there are 12 high leverage practices for K-12 special education teachers. HLP 11, identify and prioritize long-term and short-term learning goals. HLP 12, systematically design instruction toward a specific learning goal. HLP 13, adapt curriculum, tasks, and materials for specific learning goals. HLP 14, teach cognitive and metacognitive strategies to support learning and independence. HLP 15, provide scaffolded supports. HLP 16, use explicit instruction. HLP 17, use flexible grouping. HLP 18, use strategies to promote active student engagement. HLP 19, use assistive and instructional technologies. HLP 20, provide intensive instruction. HLP 21, teach students to maintain and generalize new learning across time and settings. And HLP 22, provide positive and constructive feedback to guide students' learning and behavior. We will watch a video demonstration of several of the high leverage practices number 8 and 22. Provide positive and constructive feedback to guide students' learning and behavior. Try it application 2.4. Take a look at the work sample on the slide. We see 5 rows of student-written addition problems. The student has written 36 is the sum of 6 plus 3, for example, in row 1. The learning goal, lesson objective, and a note are provided. The learning goal for grade 3 is written, write addition number sentences. The lesson objective is, given whole numbers 10 through 100, Tyree will use the split addition strategy to write number sentences, e.g., 45 is the sum of 40 plus 5 in 3 out of 5 opportunities. Note that the lesson in this learning goal involves the split addition strategy. This is also called the break apart strategy. With this strategy, students break the numbers into their respective place value, and then they add the numbers to compute the sum. So write an example of positive and constructive feedback that you would provide to guide this student's learning. For those of you working on an EdTPA e-portfolio this semester, pause for a minute to make a few connections between what you know about specially designed instruction, high leverage practices 8 and 22, and Task 3 assessment for the EdTPA. At a level 3 on rubric 12, we need to be able to write our commentary to justify that we provided specific feedback that related to the learning and that focused on the focus learner's needs or that focused on reinforcing the focus learner's strengths. At a level 3 for rubric 13, we must describe how the focus learner will understand and use feedback related to the learning goal. What might this description look like or sound like for the feedback that you provided on the math sample in Triad Application 2.4? Describe how Tyree would be able to understand and use your feedback in relation to the learning goal, which was write addition number sentences. The more reflective you are, the more effective you are. Hall and Simmerl. As special education teachers, we can name and describe the 22 high leverage practices, but this is not enough to match the task facing each of us. To develop and implement specially designed instruction, we have to do more than choose from a selection of tools. We, as vessels of embodied knowledge, must flexibly use the 22 high leverage practices to meet a variety of changing needs. Section 3 of this module addresses explicit instruction. 16 has a reputation of being a pretty sweet number. High leverage practice number 16 is use explicit instruction. What do we mean by the term explicit instruction? Hughes, Morris, Therian, and Benson define explicit instruction as a group of research-supported instructional behaviors used to design and deliver instruction that provides needed supports for successful learning through clarity of language and purpose and reduction of cognitive load. It promotes active engagement by requiring frequent and varied responses followed by appropriate affirmative and corrective feedback, and assists long-term retention through the use of purposeful practice strategies. That's a complete definition. There's a lot to unpack. For now, let's pause to watch some video demonstrations of explicit instruction. Of the 16 elements of explicit instruction, which stand out to you as the easiest to notice and describe? Which features are likely present but perhaps harder to describe in terms of providing evidence that these key features are in place? Revisit the lesson plan that you most recently wrote. Find examples of evidence that show your skilled use of explicit instruction. Part 4 of this module addresses intensive instruction. Recall that intensive instruction, or II, is a very specific demonstration of specially designed instruction. In this conceptual definition, we can catch a glimpse of the break-apart strategy again. Here, intensive instruction is what results when the facets of intensity intersect with instruction. To be intensive, instruction demonstrates 1, 2, or 3 attributes. First, the teacher decreases the group size. For example, small group instruction changes to one-to-one instruction. Next, the teacher increases the frequency. For example, the number of sessions per week adjust from 3 to 5. And duration. For example, a 20-minute lesson becomes a 45-minute lesson. Finally, the teacher adjusts complexity. In this case, complexity refers to the number of explicit instruction elements used during instruction. In part 3 of this module, we examined 16 elements of explicit instruction. Another way to think about intensive instruction is as a process by which the intensity of an intervention is increased to match the severity of student need or lack of expected or adequate academic and behavioral progress. One hallmark of intensive instruction is the use of data to make decisions. To make decisions that are informed by data, we need a solid plan for collecting and representing data. Here are some examples of data that can be collected repeatedly over time and displayed visually in a line graph so that decisions can be made. Number of words read correctly per minute, total written words, number of words retold after listening to a story, percentage accuracy on math calculations, number of steps in the task completed with fewer than 2 verbal prompts, number of seconds that lapsed between the teacher stating the direction and the student executing the task. What are some examples of data that you currently collect? Be prepared to learn more about data collection and analysis in a future session. To close, here is some word play wrap-up. Complete the limerick. There was a young boy named Tyree. His math time was filled with glee. They broke apart numbers and learned from their blunders because teacher feedback earned a score of blank.